Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Wingfield, and I'm here to talk to you about lethal autonomous weapons, lethal artificial intelligence, as some experts call them, killer robots. Specifically, how we're going to apply the law of war to weapons, autonomous weapons we are now developing. First question I want to ask all of you, not everyone all at once, is who are these two people? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. The one on the left is Hermann Goering. As you know, he was a senior Nazi captured for the Nuremberg trials, and his defense was the defense of superior orders. He admitted to committing war crimes, but he said that since he was ordered to do so by higher echelons, by the Fuhrer, that he was not responsible. As long as he was ordered to do it, he cannot be blamed. That defense did not work at Nuremberg, and that defense doesn't work now. The defense of superior orders does not immunize a subordinate from doing something which is patently, obviously a war crime. Now, harder question. Who knows who the person on the right is? Anyone? Anyone at all? Okay. This is General Yamashita. Now, he was also known as the Tiger of Malaya. He was a very interesting character. Before World War II, he was one of the few army officers that insisted it was a bad idea to go to war with the Americans, to go to war with the British, the Dutch, the Australians. He doubted the moral correctness of this, and he doubted the ability of Japan to continue on in a war that lasted more than a year, year and a half. He got into trouble for this. He kept his command, but he was not in the majority. He also got into trouble once he started conquering most of the countries of Thailand and Singapore. He got in trouble for treating his European prisoners too humanely, forbidding beatings and giving them more food and water because they were larger. He got into quite a bit of trouble for this, for his humanity. So it's particularly unfortunate that after the war was over, he was put on trial by General MacArthur for what his troops did in the Philippines, even though he was not in the Philippines. Now, his defense at the time was he did not know what his troops were doing. He was up in Singapore, they were down in the Philippines. He had no direct communications. He did not order them to commit any war crimes. It was not his fault because he did not know. At that trial, we invented a new legal doctrine, and we called it the Doctrine of Command Responsibility. So from that point forward, it didn't defend the general or the admiral that he did not know. The new standard was whether he knew or should have known. By the should have known standard, that creates a duty for the general to get out there, to find out what his troops are doing, and to make sure they're not doing the wrong thing. So we have Goering say, from him we learned that orders from above do not immunize you, and from Yamashita we've learned that the actions of those below you, of which you're unaware, those do not immunize you. So command responsibility is a really important idea. It's the most important one I'll talk about today, and it is the single most important idea when we talk about the law of autonomous weapons. And I'll show you why. All right, so I told you who these two people are. Who's this person? Anyone? Anyone? That's right. Thank you very much. Yes. It's my 5-year-old daughter, Catherine Isla. We'll get to her later. She plays a crucial role in this near the end of the presentation. Okay. Now, when it comes to accountability, you all know who that is on the right. You know, every military officer knows you may delegate authority, but you may not delegate responsibility. You retain the responsibility for the actions of subordinates to whom you have delegated authority on your behalf. So, the Yamashita standard, which is what we call the Doctrine of Command Responsibility, requires that a commander, a planner, an operator of cyber weapons have an awareness of what's going on, a degree of control, and a degree of ability to stop a weapon that's doing the wrong thing. So, put another way, the leader has to be able to train the system beforehand, monitor the system in the present, and if necessary, punish or shut down the system after it's all over. Sort of a 3-step process. All right. Now, when we talk about autonomous weapons, what are we actually talking about? You hear it in the news all the time, and people are talking about it, but What makes autonomous special? There's one particular word that you have to look for, and it makes all the legal and policy difference in the world. When we talk about automatic weapons, they engage and fire without any human intervention. They're pointed at an otherwise empty area of sea or sky or land, cleared of other civilians or non-combatants, and they are told to simply engage when a target pops up. No human intervention. An autonomous weapon, on the other hand, selects, engages, and fires without human intervention. Selecting targets is the key action for a soldier in the law of war. Whoever selects the targets is responsible, and that person has to be trained before the fight, led during the fight, and then, if necessary, punished after the fight. Now, in cyber, when we're talking about autonomous weapons, especially virtual autonomous weapons, killer robots that have no bodies, they are simply code that is aware enough to make decisions on its own in a denied area. When we see that, the whole reason we're trying to optimize their speed is to get into Colonel Boyd's inside their OODA loop, to be able to think and act more quickly than the enemy. So we don't have the luxury of going as slowly as we have to, like the sloths in the movie Zootopia, to make the decision at human speed. In order to stay inside an enemy's OODA loop and to fight and think at cyber speed, it needs to move much more quickly and think much more quickly than we do. So what does that mean? It means that as we talk about autonomous systems, there are 3 separate levels we need to keep straight in our heads. And most of the bad thinking about this right now conflates these. If you separate them into 3 levels, the debates become much clearer because each level has its own set of rules. At the base level, that's where we are when it comes to drone warfare. We can have a huge theater full of commanders, decision makers, planners, weapons operators, systems operators, pilots, lawyers like me, and they can all confer at human speed while the drone gently and safely circles above a target, deciding whether and when and how to engage. Drones can operate at human speed. That's the bottom blue level. With cyber weapons, we send them in to do what they have to do at very high speed, and they have to be able to get into databases, move to other servers, size up what they see before defenders can reconfigure the network, and that has to happen faster than we can think. Now, if they run into a serious problem, they can simply stop, or they can phone home and ask mom and dad what to do next. That's the intermediate green level where for simple automatic things, they operate at cyber speed, but for target selection, they have to stop, come back, and just ask us to think about it for a while. That works in very simple cyber targets. However, in the top level, that reddish-orange one, that's where we're going against cyber targets that are denied areas. That is, not only do we not have communications with our AI, but by definition, to get in there, see what's what, decide what to attack, do that, and then get out without leaving any remnant of itself, it has to be able to do that in microseconds. So by definition, it can't stop in the middle of a firefight in cyberspace and ask mom and dad what it should do next. So for weapons operating in denied areas, and more important, operating at the speed of cyber, selecting targets perhaps with destructive or even lethal consequences, well, in that case, we need to give it some kind of guidance, and it can't be the kind of guidance which is just phone home and we'll talk about it. That won't work. So, what do I mean when I talk about this? When we talk about denied areas, we either mean that we're sending in commandos or aircraft or robots to an area where either for communications security to not give away their location, or because they're being jammed, they're unable to communicate with us. So when they go into a denied area, not only do they have to have all the information, all the instructions we can give them, but they have to have the training, even the education, to size up unexpected situations and make decisions on their own without any involvement from the White House Situation Room, the War Room in the Pentagon, or anyone else. and that requires a lot of upfront planning, thinking, and training. There's another kind of denied area, which is going at high speed. Even if we are in touch with it, it may be a fraction of a second from the beginning of the campaign till the end of the campaign. And if that's the case, we don't have the leisure of stopping the fight and deciding what the rules are, how they apply, and what our AI should do. The AI has to know what to do. It needs to be baked into the AI. So, what does that mean from a lawyer's perspective? Okay, we'll have both real killer robots and virtual code AI that are operating in denied areas or operating at denied speeds, which is the same thing as far as we're concerned. They'll be selecting targets, and over the years, they'll be causing increasing levels of destruction for which the planners, the operators, the commanders will be legally responsible. We are responsible for the AI's target selection. Just because they do that independently doesn't mean we are not responsible for the consequences of that decision. That being the case, we have to bake into our AI enough knowledge of what the outer limits in the law of war are so they can operate on their own without turning us into war criminals because we sent this killer robot out into cyberspace without the proper training. So, what's the proper training? What do we need to worry about? This is where it gets simple because Congress made it very, very simple for us. Just like we have the 4+1 construct of threats, there's a 4+1 construct of war crimes that we have to look for in cyberspace. There are 5 things, these 4+1, that Congress has said if a commander allows these things to happen by virtual means, the commander is going to be locked up for the rest of her life. And in wartime, the punishment could be even more severe than that. What are they? Well, first of all, I'll say actually last of all, is command responsibility. That is, the commander has the responsibility to prevent these first 4 things by being done by our virtual weapon systems out in cyberspace. We have to have our systems understand what these 4 things are. Luckily, they're pretty simple, and in about 2 minutes, I can explain what they are. Distinction. It is permissible to attack military objectives and military combatants, but not civilians and their property. You have to make a distinction between military objectives and civilian objects, and you may intentionally target only military objectives. Pretty straightforward. Second, proportionality. Even if you're targeting a military objective, the blast radius of a correctly targeted attack may still take out a civilian in the second or third row or on the other side of the room. So are you never allowed to hurt any civilians ever without being a war criminal? And that's not the case. The rule is the more important the military the target, the larger the permissible blast radius that hurts civilians. So if we're targeting this person right here, and simply a private in the enemy army, we better hit that person and no one around him. But if we're hitting this person over here, who's the maximum dictator of the enemy army, then dropping a JDAM into this pavilion and taking out everybody in the audience, well, that perhaps would be permissible because of the importance of the target. So proportionality says never target civilians, but if you're targeting a military combatant, the more important the combatant, the larger the permissible blast radius of collateral damage. The higher a CDE, collateral damage estimate, you may proceed with. Third is necessity. There are 5 weapons that may not be used at all: bio, chemical, blinding lasers, transparent weapons, and explosive weapons less than 400 grams. That doesn't really apply to cyber. All necessity says is you can use all the force you have to destroy a military target, but no more just for the fun of it. So whatever the force is required, that amount is automatically legal. That's an operational legal question. If it's already destroyed and you're causing more damage just to give the boys the chance to blow off some steam, or they're doing some vandalism for the fun of it, that would be the war crime. And then finally, chivalry. You can pretend to be anything in the world to get past enemy defenses and launch an attack except medical and religious personnel. As long as you're not pretending to be a priest or an imam or any kind of chaplain, or you're not pretending to be any kind of doctor, nurse, or corpsman, then you're allowed to pretend to be anything. You're just not allowed to pretend to be a non-combatant. So no pretending to be wounded, no pretending to surrender, no pretending to be a civilian, no pretending to be a non-combatant, and then launch an attack. So those are the 4 basic rules we've got to train our AIs on. They're not complicated rules, but nothing less than an understanding of the principle will do, because we'll be launching these things into situations where it will not be as simple as simply saying, go to row 3, seat 2, and that's okay. But Jay Healy in the back row in seat 5 is strictly off limits. You can't say that. It has to understand these basic principles, and they have to be baked in so it has the capacity to make some decisions on its own before selecting targets. Putting it another way, failing to bake in those 4+1 ideas into a virtual AI, into a lethal AI, failing to do that would be a war crime for everyone from the person who launches it all the way up to the commander who approved the mission. So this is a challenge for us in this new realm. Okay, I showed you a picture of this person before, Catherine Isla Wingfield, my 5-year-old daughter. And you're probably wondering why I'm raising this. Well, as I bring my presentation to a close on virtual AI, I'd like to close with a little analogy on how we're moving from automatic cyber weapons to autonomous cyber weapons. So stick with me for the last 2 minutes and see if this makes sense to you. Okay, imagine automatic weapons as having a learner's permit. You're 15 years old, but you can't drive without having your parent, or a licensed adult driver, right there in the passenger seat next to you. So when Catherine Isla Wingfield is 15 and she gets her learner's permit, I'll do all the things that I'm supposed to do. I'll get her a safe car. I'll make sure it's in good repair. I'll get her auto insurance. I'll have medical coverage if, God forbid, someone gets hurt. And I'll give her very good driver's education. In addition to that, if something goes wrong and I'm with her in the car, then I will be right there so I can give guidance. I can shout guidance at the top of my lungs. And if I need to, I can reach over and grab the wheel. That's where we are with automatic weapons, and that's where we are with drones right now. They have a learner's permit, and we are with them in the car. We are with them in real time to give guidance and prevent the worst outcomes. When we move to fully autonomous AI that is going to be fighting and thinking at cyber speed, we will not have that luxury. Catherine Isla Wingfield is going to be 16 years old, and she is going to have a driver's license, and she's going to be out there. So what's the difference? Well, I'm still going to try to get her a safe car. I'm still going to make sure it's in good repair, have auto insurance, medical insurance, very good driver's education program. But beyond that, because I will not be there as she makes her decisions, some with potentially life-threatening consequences, all I can do is hope for the best. She'll be on her own. We are in the process of moving our cyber weapons from a learner's permit to a driver's license. And that last step of selection of targets is an enormous qualitative difference in what it's able to do and our level of responsibility for training, even using the word educating it, to be able to think through these things as carefully as possible. That is all I have. Thank you very much for your attention. Are there any questions? Sir.
Thank you for the presentation. Very enlightening and thought-provoking. So I'll start with something, and in the very beginning, perhaps you covered something like this, but let's take a situation like Stuxnet. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that it was enabled or launched by, created by the United States government. Now, albeit it could be a slightly different situation if it was not the DoD element, it would be different authorities, do different rules apply. So, and how would you define that as an autonomous, semi-autonomous? Because it had to meet all the preconditions, but there was no target verification of the air gaps.
That's a really good question. Where we are with Stuxnet, as impressive as it is, I would say that it goes There we go. I would put Stuxnet in the middle area because part of what it did was on its own at cyber speed to get to where it needed to go and to look around on its own, executing a script for making sure I'm on the right kind of hardware, I'm in the presence of the right kind of software, and the inputs are what I'm expecting to see. So parts of what it did, there were autonomous components of its mission. However, it was told, don't do anything until you phone home and make contact so we make sure you're in the right place. In addition to that, they baked in, make sure not only right software, right hardware, and other things they had to look for, but also only try to activate a certain number of times, only activate over a particular time period, and then go inert so you can't be a continuing threat to other things. That really limited the potential for collateral damage. That is about the last word in automatic weapons. But when it came to autonomous, we can imagine a Stuxnet where we had to put it onto a network and not just load it directly into an air-gapped computer where it was just where it needed to be. But if we had to have it make decisions about, can I go through this computer? Can I stay here? Can I shut down that server in order to allow me to get into that computer? If it had to make these kinds of decisions on its own that were going to destroy 1,000 or 2,000 centrifuges, then it would have to understand some of these limits. Otherwise, whoever it was in the chain of command, in whatever country or countries it was that launched it, they would be on the hook for the damage it did if we're not making those decisions. So I don't know who launched Stuxnet, but whoever they were, they had a really good legal team because they answered all of those questions during the design phase.
I would ask though, how do you, can you talk a little bit more about the definition of chivalry?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It sounds like one of those ridiculous doctrines where, officers must drink, from bone china with their pinkies extended in the officers' mess. And it's just that for the last 1,000 years, parts of chivalry have found their way into the law of war and they still exist. Officers may not be forced to work when they're POWs. Enlisted men may, but not officers. And there are other things as well. The one thing that remains is the distinction between ruses de guerre, ruses of war, which is military deception, camouflage, switched raids, false colors until you're ready to open fire, then you show your true colors, pretending to be something before engaging in combat. Ruses de guerre are all completely lawful. That 99% is good. The 1% that's a war crime is legal deception. That is, the only kind of deception that's a war crime is pretending to be a non-combatant and betraying that confidence to launch an offensive attack. Pretending to surrender, I'm a non-combatant, and then shoot the people that take your surrender. Pretending to be wounded, and then when they come out to save your life, killing them. Pretending to be a civilian, going about your business, and then going into enemy headquarters and killing everybody. Pretending something along these lines. Pretending to be a non-combatant is called perfidy, and perfidy is a war crime.
But go back to kind of like the Stuxnet scenario, and perhaps I don't understand as well as you do, but I'm under the understanding that that software function as it's intended to function, and it was a legitimate. It was legitimate in that it did what it was supposed to do, but when it saw all the preconditions, then it did something else. So it's operating somewhere else, it's doing what it's supposed to do. Is that still fall in there?
No, I see exactly what you're saying, and I think you're looking right at the most important distinction we need to make. Think about an Aegis system between sensors and missiles that just carves out an area of the sky and just says, there are no airliners there. There's nothing in that area of the sky that isn't something that we want to blow out of the sky. So we don't know where it is, but if anything goes into this volume of space, destroy it, Aegis system. Okay, and then it meets the criteria and it does that. We can see other weapons that do similar things to that. A Patriot missile system, once it's put into a certain mode, saying anything at this altitude, at this speed, that meets these criteria, don't even ask, just destroy it. And so those are very, very limited. And we consider those automatic weapons because the humans are selecting out any possibility where there are any realistic possibility of collateral damage to humans. But if we had a weapon system that was, okay, drone, go off on your own, fly around this city, and as soon as you do some facial recognition on some of these bad guys, just attack without checking in at all, then we have to make sure that facial recognition is pretty close to perfect because it's doing the target selection. We're not clearing a civilian area. We're putting it into an area where it's going to have to decide, I don't want to hurt Jay Healy, I do want to hurt you. And that's a higher level of capability than we've built into systems if we know we can just plug some software into the right computer. Good questions. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all very much for your attention. I appreciate it.